Not much snow down here, but I've got almost a 4,000 foot climb to get up to the lake. So I think conditions are going to be a little bit different once I get up there. And then if I do want to snowboard, it's probably another 1,500 feet to get up into some of those lines. So it's going to be a big day of climbing. One thing that has taken some getting used to from coming out here from the Midwest is just how different the conditions can be depending on where you're going. I mean, in Michigan, I could look out my window and I would know that that's what the conditions are going to be like for my hike. Snow depth and things like that don't really change. But here, where I live in Livingston, there's hardly ever any snow on the ground. But when I go up into the mountains, there could be 8 feet. And the weather could be completely different. I am back in the Absarokas today. This will be a bigger trip, staying out for the night. It's about a 7-mile hike. I've done one place in the Absarokas already, but that was kind of a mellow mountain. Just a rounded, bald hill, basically. And the Absaroka Mountains are much more extreme than that. So this will be my first time really getting into them.
That right there is an avalanche.
That's pretty cool. This is probably the closest encounter that I've had to a fresh avalanche like that. It probably started much higher up and just kind of got funneled down into that gully. You can see how these avalanches carve out gullies like that in the landscape. There's a whole bunch of dead trees and stuff that have been uprooted by that snow. I'm also seeing some other avalanche activity from warm weather.
These look like kind of slow-moving wet slides.
Whatever fresh snow that we had for the last snowfall, probably about a week ago. It looks like that's all sliding on top of a hard crust layer. You may have noticed that I'm not giving away the exact names of all these places that I'm going to. That's basically for the purpose of kind of keeping these places a little bit secret. For me, a big part of backcountry snowboarding is to get away from the crowds. And I think that's why a lot of people like doing it. So I'm taking a little bit of caution to try and not blow these places up. But with that being said, a lot of these places are already pretty popular, so I'm definitely not the only one who knows about them. And I think part of the fun with backcountry snowboarding is finding your own spots anyway. When I was first starting out, a lot of the spots that I was going to were from a backcountry snowboarding book. But lately, some of the spots that I've been going to I found on my own, and I think that adds an extra element of adventure to the whole thing. It's kind of exciting not knowing exactly what you're getting into and having to route find and everything. That adds a little bit more danger too, because you don't know exactly what you're getting into. But that kind of comes with the territory of adventure. The spring meltdown has begun. It kind of just looks like the tops of the mountains are shedding all their snow. Pretty much every avalanche path there is has an avalanche. Most of it's just kind of minor wet slides, loose surface snow, but I have seen a couple slab avalanches too, stuff that goes a little bit deeper.
And here's another avalanche. What makes this one even more concerning is that there actually was a slab that broke. Right up there you can see the crown. Looks like it's about 2 feet deep. That's what I'm really concerned about, is a whole slab breaking.
And it looks like that was caused by a whole bunch of roller balls, which are melting and falling from those cliffs up there. And probably the impact of that is what triggered that slab. So I'm on pretty high alert as I'm moving through this terrain. I think I just heard an avalanche too. It was somewhere behind me. I couldn't see it, but it sounded like something was moving down there. If I was in this situation just 3 or 4 months ago, I probably would have turned around by now. Back then I didn't have any experience to rely on, so I just assumed that everything was really dangerous, which is definitely the right way to start out. Getting into this avalanche terrain, you want to start out extremely conservative. And I'm starting to feel like I have a handle on what causes an avalanche. But that actually puts me in a much higher risk bracket as far as getting caught in an avalanche. The stats about avalanche fatalities are kind of interesting. It's not the people who are brand new to it that are the most susceptible. It's the people who kind of feel like they know what they're doing. Those are the ones that die in avalanches more often than anybody else. So that's always in the back of my mind as I'm going through this stuff, but so far I haven't seen anything that makes me feel like I need to turn around. And actually seeing all this avalanche activity is a really good educational opportunity. There's a lot of different conditions coming into play here that's causing all of this, and it's pretty interesting to kind of break it all down, figure out what's causing each avalanche. I've been climbing for about 5 hours already. Starting to get kind of tired. I still have to get up there. The lake is just over that next rise. Got another 500 feet maybe of elevation. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but obviously I am no avalanche expert. I've got less than a year of experience under my belt. Even the avalanche experts say that there are no experts. Nobody ever really knows for sure. All you can do is gain experience and add things to your toolkit as far as diagnosing avalanche danger. And that's what I'm trying to do out here, trying to get as much experience as I can. And every time I go out, I learn a little bit something new. All right, finally at the lake. It is incredible up here. This might be my new favorite spot. That was definitely the biggest climb I've ever done on a split board. Probably one of the prettiest climbs. And maybe one of the sketchiest. There were a couple spots there where I was going through pretty steep slopes. I found a bit of a weak layer on top of the slab that I was on. So that was kind of nerve-wracking. That's why I didn't film that part. But I'm up here. Now I gotta look for a place to set up camp. I'm just about out of water, so I'm gonna get a fire going right away and melt some snow. Well, it looks like this is home for tonight. Mostly what I'm looking for in a campsite right now is something that's out of the wind, which is like pretty hard to find around here. There's not a lot of shelter. And even this spot is a little bit breezy still, but shouldn't be too bad. One thing I'm using to determine if a spot's going to be windy or not, because the wind isn't always going, it comes in gusts. So it could be kind of deceiving. You might think that a spot is good because it's not windy at that moment, but that doesn't mean that the wind isn't coming through. So one thing I'm using as a clue to figure that out is the patterns in the snow. They're called scallops, and that's what happens when the wind kind of like scours the snow consistently. So I definitely don't want to set up in a spot that has a whole bunch of scallops. You can see I'm set up kind of on a ridge, and this little gully on the side here, that's all scalloped out. So that means that that's kind of a wind path. There's a little stand of trees here, and I think they're providing just enough shelter to give me a little bit of a wind block. The wind kind of goes up and over instead of through this little ridge here. So I'm actually going to build my fire right next to the trees, and that's kind of like the most protected area. It's not very big, but it's just big enough for me. that just burnt my hand pretty bad. That was really stupid. Oh, that was so dumb. Went to grab my pot off the fire and the metal handle was super freaking hot. It should have been fine the way I put it on there, but I guess the wind changed direction and it moved the flames, so they were blowing onto the handle instead of away from it. And I didn't notice that. Woke up to a beautiful morning. It's like 45 degrees already by the time I got out of the tent. Gonna make some breakfast and find a place to snowboard before the sun heats everything up too much. It already is affecting a bunch of slopes. But there's a bowl on that side that's still in the shade. So I might go check that out. I'm standing in the debris field of a pretty big avalanche. I've never seen an avalanche like this so close up. This is pretty interesting. This one looks like it was triggered by a cornice collapsing way up on top of the ridge. You can see these huge chunks of snow. You can actually see like big divots in the slope as they must have kind of bounced and caught on the way down. And yeah, they rolled pretty far, all the way out to there. Pretty deep debris pile over there too. It looks like it's probably 10 feet deep at least. That would not be good to get buried in that. That makes me really curious to know what the snowpack is looking like here. So I think I'm going to find a place to dig a pit just to kind of see what it's looking like down there. I did it! I caught an avalanche on film. Nice. So that's interesting. I dug the pit here and actually got really good results. So that could tell me a few different things. Either I dug the pit in the wrong spot, so it's not representative of the slope that slid over there, which is entirely possible, because this is on the same aspect, much different elevation, but it should see the same kind of sun activity. I think what's much different here is wind activity, because down here the wind is basically stripping these slopes. There isn't much wind loading going on, but up on top of the ridge, when the wind comes over from the opposite side, it's moving a lot of snow on the opposite side of the ridge and putting it on this side of the ridge. So the tops of the ridges are very wind loaded, and that means there's a lot of fresh material up there to slide. And that's a total recipe for an avalanche. The reason that I think that is because you can see the cornices up there. They are huge. And when you see cornices like that, it means that the wind is coming from the opposite direction, going this way. So there's definitely a lot of wind loading that's been happening up towards the top of this ridge. So the snow down here is stable, but up there where the wind loading is happening, it's probably unstable. So this has all been pretty educational, but not worth it as far as finding a line to ride. Well, this avalanche activity is telling me to stick to shallower slopes right now. So I think I'm going to head back towards camp. And there are some shallower slopes over there. I can ride those. I'm getting plenty of split skiing practice in today. At least I'm going downhill on something. Instead of walking all the way back to camp, I found a little bit of a hill to ride. That'll take me most of the way. Looks like at its very steepest it might be 30 degrees. Most of it's not. So I feel comfortable enough about that. Almost. Camp is right there. I am at the top of the ridge I'm looking at riding. Camp is right down there. I'm gonna dig another pit up here. This is a totally different area. East facing slope up on top of the ridge. As you can see, there's a cornice up there. So that means wind's coming from the west going east. And that means that the top of this ridge is probably a little bit wind loaded. So I'm thinking this pit will be a little bit more representational. This will tell me exactly what I'm about to go into. One thing they taught us in the Avalanche course is that you shouldn't really be looking for stable snow. You should be looking for the unstable snow. So then you know where it is. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. With this probably wind-loaded slope, I'm thinking that I might find something unstable here. So I think this is kind of the culprit for a lot of the avalanches that I'm seeing around here. The snowpack actually isn't that unstable, but this top couple inches right here is extremely wet. It's really warm out. It's like 60 degrees right now. And so this top layer, it's melting and it's kind of consolidating together. And this is kind of what's like sloughing off of the cliffs in steeper spots. And once a bunch of this stuff collects, it all kind of like rolls together, and that's why we're seeing a whole bunch of those loose, wet snow avalanches. Not so many big slab avalanches, but just like kind of the loose, wet stuff. Whoa. So on 22, that's a pretty solid slab that just went. Very consolidated, slid on a pretty hard layer. I'm going to do the extended column test. I don't know how deep the snow is here because it's deeper than my probe. So that's ECTN12. Stands for Extended Column Test, 12 hits. And the N stands for no propagation, which is a good thing. I'm going to keep going. Alright, and then another no propagation on 30. So the snow's a little bit unstable. There's a couple weak layers in here. But not unstable enough to propagate. At least that's what it looks like. Judging from all the avalanches that I'm seeing, you wouldn't guess that the snow is this stable. I think that proves that most of the avalanches are being caused by this kind of wet layer way up here. This is like super wet. This is almost completely water. But we're not seeing any persistent weak layers or buried weak layers or anything like that. At least I can't find them. what it's like to ride through avalanche debris. This is the slope that I had to climb up yesterday that made me kind of nervous. Pretty steep slopes, terrain traps with the trees and stuff, and none of this avalanche debris was here yesterday. Now I have to ride through it all. Having a heavy backpack on doesn't help either. This is gonna happen a lot. I'm free for now. So that's a wet slide. Just a little guy, but that would be pretty scary if that was much bigger. I'm just constantly hearing things falling off of these cliffs up here. That's a rock. Oh, that was dumb. That was not a good idea. Oh, the snow was so sticky on the landing. Saw a little jump and I wanted to go off of it. Well, now I'm in the trees the rest of the way. That will not be very exciting. Yeah, like I said, not very exciting.